Okay, Lupe, I just got your email in which you tell me that you got most of your nonfiction inventory done, but that you're still having trouble with structure, that you're having trouble understanding what you have to do there. I'm going to begin by reading the question itself, and then I'll describe what I'm asking you to do. Structure. Describe the structure of the text. How does the author lay out the information he or she presents? Why do you think the author chose to structure the information in this manner? Explain your answer by referencing the text. So, basically, we know that you did number one. Number one is basically you took every paragraph and, in your own words, you paraphrased what the main idea of that text was, because we do understand that one paragraph always has its own main idea. And I wanted you to write down the supporting details. So we know what all the ideas are in Pericles' funeral oration. In structure, it's a little bit more complex than that, in the sense that you don't redo number one. Basically, what you're doing is you're explaining the reason, or you're explaining why you think Pericles or Thucydides laid out the information in such a way. The layout of information. So, for instance, for number one, you would have said that Thucydides begins by explaining funeral rites, and then you would give 2 or 3 details of what are some of the support, some of the funeral rites, some of the things that happen in the funeral rites. However, if in structure, you're just looking at why he does that. So, for instance, and what I mean by that is why it's not 17 paragraphs, because some ideas are related to one another, but they're part of a bigger reason for doing it. For instance, the first 3 paragraphs are basically the one thing. Basically, it's Thucydides talking, explaining funeral rites, and explaining this tradition. That's only one thing. Even though it's more than one paragraph there, that's the first thing he does. That's the first thing he lays out. So if I were doing number 8, for the first 3 paragraphs or whatever it is, I would just say one thing. I'm not looking at by paragraph. I'm looking at by chunk of information. Like, what's the whole general idea there? I would say something like, in the beginning of the text, in the first 3 paragraphs, Thucydides carefully explains how Athenians performed their funeral rites for their fallen soldiers. The reason why this would be important was probably because Thucydides understands that people reading this text might not be Athenians themselves. Since Thucydides wrote this way after Pericles gave that speech to the Athenian citizens, more than likely people reading it are probably not going to be Athenian. He was also exiled. So he understands that some people are going to need information about Athenian rites, because they're not going to know why Athenians do that. If it was Pericles' audience, the Athenian people, there wouldn't be no need to explain the funeral rites. Okay? But since Thucydides, the writer who documents Pericles' funeral oration, he understands that the people reading the transcribed Pericles' funeral oration, he understands that in the future it might not be the Athenian people reading it, because they already heard it. So that's why the first 3, if I were the one doing this, I would say the first 3 paragraphs Thucydides devotes to explaining funeral rites for people who later on might read his text and might not know how Athenians perform these rites. He feels that they should have this information. In particular, and I would add this part, in this part of it, I would say in particular, he tells about what exactly how the fallen soldiers are what are the rituals associated with them. But he also tells about why Pericles. He explains why Pericles is perfect for saying the funeral speech, which was very important to Athenians. It was a special person. So I would just say that. I would just I would chunk it into pieces and explain why Thucydides, Pericles choose to present their information in such a way. Okay? I'm going to do another video real quick to finish this off, and hopefully that'll be more explanation on that. Okay? Hold on.